Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by ICOM. Heard it, worked it, logged it. Visit www.icomamerica.com/amateur for more information about ICOM radios.
It's Ham Radio with Neil Rapp. Here we go. Welcome to Ham Talk Live. Call in, let's talk. Neil's your guy. Ham Talk Live. Here we go on Ham Talk Radio.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ham Talk Live. It's episode number 168. Getting started with transmitter hunting, recorded live on Thursday, June 6th, 2019. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9 VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight, we're joined by Joe Moell, K0OV, and we'll take your calls in just a few minutes. Last week, Denny Johnson, KD5DLJ, was here to talk about the Digicom Cafe. And if you missed the show, you can listen anytime at hamtalklive.com or on your favorite podcast app or YouTube. And you can also catch the rebroadcast on WTWW shortwave 5085 AM Saturday evenings at about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Do have some announcements here at the beginning, so forgive me for a couple of minutes here, but I want to let you know about some important things. First of all, our annual Field Day question and answer session is coming up on June 20th with Bart Yonke, W9JJ. He's the radio sport manager now at ARRL. And so if you have last-minute field day questions, whether it be rule scoring or your setup, be sure to call in and ask those. I know it seems like we plan everything, and then all of a sudden, the night before, it's like, oh, what about this? So this is your chance to call in and find out the answer. So again, that's June 20th, and Bart will do his best to answer those. So be sure to call in and send in those questions. And to help check your antennas for Field Day, the 100 watts in a wire tune-up event actually started just a couple of hours ago, or an hour ago, I guess it was. But that'll be going all this weekend until 23:59 on Sunday. So get on the air, check out your antennas, portable or otherwise. The exchange is a true RST, a QTH, the type of antenna, power, height, and your 100 watts in a wire ID number if you have one. If you don't worry about it. And you can even go get one over at 100wattsinawire.com. And you can even win some prizes. So Christian wanted us to remind everybody about that. Also, June is a busy month at the National Voice of America Museum of Broadcasting over in Westchester, Ohio. Yesterday was an event at the Midpoint Library for kids about riding the radio waves. And yes, there really is a radio inside of that cell phone. And today was the 75th anniversary commemoration of D-Day out on the front lawn and a special event station. And then on Saturday, they're going to roll out the Cincinnati Liars Lager beer in celebration of the 75th anniversary of the VOA Bethany station. There's a short program. Then they're going to tap the keg and offer Cincinnati Liars T-shirts for sale during the all-day event, and a portion of the proceeds will go to the museum. And the Cincinnati Liars Lager sales will be through September 21st at Grainworks, which is just down the street from them. And that'll benefit the museum too. And they'll have 400 numbered and bottled bottles available at the museum fundraiser on September 21st. So they'll be on the air from WC8VOA for Field Day as well. So if you're in town, be sure to stop by. And one last thing, a few months ago, Sterling Coffee N0SSC was on the show talking about the youth contesting program. Well, round 2 is now in play for the IARU HF Championships coming up in mid-July. So if you can host a station for young people, or you're a young person who would like to go operate in that contest, head on over to yarc.world. That's YARC, Young Amateurs Radio Club, YARC.world, and sign up. And also, you can check out the new Youth on the Air Region 2 social media. They're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And there'll be more opportunities for young people and ham radio. And their website is also online, but it's under development right now. But it's yotaregion2.org. It's YOTA region 2, the number 2.org. So make sure you check out Yota Region 2 online for all the different youth operating activities out there. Okay, well, tonight we're going to talk about another opportunity that young people and old people and everybody in between enjoy, and that's direction finding. So get your questions ready to go for Joe. If you're listening to us live on Thursday night, you can call us after the interview by calling 812-650-9556. I'll give that number again here in a minute. And again, later in the show when it's time to call in, but I'll give that to you so you can write that down or type that in. It's 812-650-9556. You can also tweet us. It's at Ham Talk Live on Twitter. So I'll be back with Joe right after this word from ICOM right here on Ham Talk Live. Contest from home or remotely. ICOM's IC9700 is now available and shipping. Create your own band opening with ICOM's newest SDR transceiver, the IC9700. This new radio is bringing direct sampling to the UHF and VHF weak signal world. The IC9700 all-mode transceiver is loaded with innovative features like dedicated amateur satellite operation, color touchscreen, D-Star built-in, RF direct sampling on 2 meters and 70 centimeters, dual independent receivers capable of full duplex, as well as dual watch, and 100 watts maximum output powers on 2 meters, 75 watts on 70 centimeters, and 10 watts max on 1.2 gigahertz. For HF, it's the SDR every ham wants. It's the IC7610. This high-performance SDR has the ability to pick out the faintest of signals even in the presence of stronger adjacent ones. The ICOM IC7610 is a direct sampling software-defined radio that will change the world's definition of an SDR transceiver. It has RF direct sampling, 110 dB RMDR, independent dual receiver, and dual Digicel. And the IC7300 is changing the way entry-level HF is designed. This high-performance, innovative HF transceiver with a compact design will far exceed your expectations with RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, a large 4.3-inch color touchscreen, real-time spectrum scope, SD, memory card slot, and more. Visit ICOMAmerica.com/amateur for more information on ICOM radios. And don't forget to be ham active in June. Participate in both the June VHF contest as well as Field Day. Submit your logs and see how you did in the pileup.
At Ham Talk Live, we have $1 million request guarantee. You give us $1 million, and we'll do a show about whatever ham topic you request. Guaranteed.
Thanks again to ICOM America for helping bring Ham Talk Live to you each and every week. Be sure to check us out at hamtalklive.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our guest tonight is Joe Moell, K0OV. Joe's a registered professional electronic engineer and has been an amateur radio enthusiast Since age 11, Joe has 50 years of experience designing radio frequency circuits and systems for broadcast, communications, and radar, ranging from near DC to microwave. He's designed new devices for radio direction finding and has written about RDF and other topics for almost every ham radio publication in the U.S. In February 1998, he was appointed by ARRL as the USA's first ARDF coordinator to promote international-style fox hunting and to organize Team USA for international ARDF competitions. He also conducts the annual CQ Worldwide Fox Hunting Weekend, and Joe collaborated with Tom WB6UZZ to write Transmitter Hunting, Radio Direction Finding Simplified, which is a comprehensive text on radio direction finding and has written over 270 published articles on the subject, including his monthly Homing In columns that ran for 15 years in 73 Amateur Radio Today magazine, also in CQ VHF, CQ Plus Digital Magazine, and now 4 times a year in CQ Magazine. And as a technical advisor to ARRL, he authored a new chapter on radio direction finding for the ARRL Handbook and has made over 100 presentations on transmitter hunting to clubs, conventions, classes, and seminars. And Joe's website, homingin.com, is one of the leading resources of direction finding information in the world. And I remember him from hearing all about this stuff on Newsline over the years. So, Joe, welcome to Ham Talk Live.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to start back at the very beginning for some people who haven't got into this tonight, and maybe we'll get further into this as time marches on. But let's start at the beginning tonight and talk a little bit about how this all got started and the different types of transmitter hunts you can do, and all these different names: fox hunt, transmitter hunt, direction find. Are they all the same?
Well, they've had different names over the years, and different names mean different things to different people. It all started, I did some research on this in terms of the history and discovered that the very first hidden transmitter hunts were at ARRL conventions in the 1930s, where they would go around and, these were big transmitters, but they would put in a room of the convention and invite people to go find them, and they would use an earphone and put a crystal diode across it and use that for the receiver, because these were AM transmitters, and go find them that way. So it's really progressed a lot since then. When I was just a teenager, I went on hidden transmitter hunts in the car on 75 meters, and they were also popular on 10 meters. Those were the two bands in the 50s that were used for transmitter hunting. And as the days have gone by, or as the years have gone by, it's gone to mostly 2 meters for the mobile transmitter hunts. Almost all of them now are on 2 meters. Occasionally we have 6-meter hunts here in Southern California. We have had 10-meter hunts from time to time. And but in terms of the on-foot transmitter hunts, which are kind of a completely separate animal, they're usually on 2 meters or 80 meters. And it became a worldwide sport. In the early 1980s was the very first world championships of direction finding, and that was all on foot, and it was really, and you will hear this term, radio orienteering. And that's really the term they use over in Europe and in a lot of other places, where you have a map and a compass, and the transmitters are out there, and your job is to find them. And it can be a pretty big area. And that's the international rules that are used nowadays for national and international championships. Most hams, though, are involved in the mobile transmitter hunts. Everybody gets together either at the same start place or start where you want to, and there's a transmitter out there, and you just drive until you find it. And that's scored either by mileage, if you all start from the same place, which encourages you to not drive too fast, or time. Whoever gets them first wins. So that's a real brief summary of the kinds of hunts that there are. We can go into more detail as you wish.
Okay. Well, let's kind of give the overview here, and then hopefully we'll get into the detail when the questions roll in, hopefully here. But let's talk about if you want to organize and I know I've got a group of people down in Florida at N1KSC listening to this. If you want to organize a transmitter hunt, and you've never done this before, because this is the boat they're in right now, what would you do for the transmitters? And let's talk about both cases, on foot or the mobile, so that way we cover all the territory. But what would you do to get a hidden transmitter out there for people to go find?
The transmitter is the easiest part of it for the most part. I mean, it can be something as simple. If you want to get a group started in transmitter hunting, have somebody come on after the weekly net on the local repeater and say, I'm out here in my car somewhere, and I want you to come and find me. And you can be, just on a transmitter talking. Occasionally, not continuously, but just every minute or so. And that's all it really takes to get started. Now, automatic transmitters are a lot better in terms of being something you can conceal, something that's a little bit harder to find. But we always recommend that the first hunt that your group does, make it really, really simple, because you want everybody to succeed. And you want everybody to get together at a restaurant afterwards and talk about it and see how much fun you had, and then come up with ideas for the next time.
So, for instance, when I do this with my school group, I get them all, situated and everything, and then I take off, and I remember to turn off my APRS so they can't find where I'm going, and I go and I transmit for 1 minute every 5 minutes. And so they get their bearing, and then they move, and then they get another bearing, and they move, and they keep doing that, and so I don't have to get one of these automatic transmitters to do that. I just look at my watch and say, okay, it's time to transmit again. And so that may be an easy way to start. But what about if you wanted to do one on foot? Then you wanted one of those automatic transmitters that you can just hide in a park or something that's a little more contained, and you don't have to spend the money on the gas.
Okay, well, generally speaking, that you're going to want a small box or something like that you can conceal if you're in a park, so that you're not right out in the open. There are commercial units you can buy, the so-called Squawk Box by the fellow in Santa Barbara. There is Bionics makes a couple of little transmitters that you can buy. If you don't want to buy something, get an ammo can or a big plastic box, put a Baofeng or other inexpensive...
Oh, wait a minute. You said the Baofeng word.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we got it.
Okay. Or you could, or a Wushan. How's that?
Yeah, there you go. We don't have a Wuxon. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, there are devices that you can hook to a radio like that, such as the Pic-On. A lot of people are making these. They're fairly easy to make with an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or something like that just sends little deedle tones, we call them, that maybe transmit for 15 seconds and then go off for 15 seconds. I recommend that the duty cycle be about 50%. That saves your battery, but it also makes it a little easier to find at first. 1 minute out of 5 gets a little trickier, but it depends on the skill level of the hunters, certainly. But there are easily things that you can find to hook to inexpensive radios to make a hidden transmitter.
So if you get one of these, and you can get these little kits even that you put together, and it turns the transmitter on and plays a recording and then turns off, and so you can set these things up and just turn people loose on them.
I've known somebody that have made them out of old cell phones, but all you really need is something like a little MP3 player. And you make a continuous recording that repeats, make a file that repeats continuously, a file maybe a minute long. And if the radio has a Vox on it, as some of the Chinese radios do, all you have to do is feed that into the microphone jack, turn it on, and it will key up the transmitter when it's time to transmit.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. That's a good Good hack there. Okay, well, very good. Well, let's talk about the receivers then. We've talked about putting some transmitters out there. Let's talk about the options for some of these receivers, and antennas are really important too.
Well, okay, let's make it simple because and talk about the on-foot hunts first, because almost everybody uses the same technology for that. And of course, we're going to talk about 2 meters at this point, although you could probably do the same thing for 440, just different antenna size. But generally speaking, it's a directional antenna such as a Yagi. And for on-foot use, the by far most popular option is the measuring tape beam. Designs are easy to find on the web. Typically, a 3-element beam for 2 meters is fairly compact and easy to make. All you need is the measuring tape, some PVC pipe, and the coax fittings and a little soldering, and you're done. There are even kits available if you want to do that. And you just hook that up to the 2-meter receiver, and you can hunt, except that as you get close, you won't be able to get bearings anymore. The receiver will be overloaded. So somebody came up some years ago with a very clever idea, and that's called the offset attenuator, which is basically a little box that has a crystal oscillator of maybe 2 megahertz, 4 megahertz, and a mixer. And with that box, you actually move the frequency of the signal you're listening to, 2 or 4 megahertz, and you listen on the offset frequency, and with the control that controls the oscillator level into the mixer, you can actually dial down the input signal by maybe 100 dB, so you can walk right up to a hidden transmitter, and that works very, very well. And that's the most popular way that people get started in on-foot transmitter hunting. There are receiver boxes you can buy. There's even a very sophisticated one that is used by people in the the world, on the world stage, that is made by Rig Expert. It's a new one that just came out, but we call the other one, we call the Blue Box, which is made in Australia, is very, very popular also. Those boxes will cost you a couple $100, and the Rig Expert one will cost you even more. But that's why most people get started with the simple measuring tape beam and the offset attenuator for the 2-meter band.
Okay, and then what about mobile?
Okay, for mobile, again, tastes differ. Here in Southern California, almost everybody also uses some sort of a beam antenna, typically a Yagi or a quad, and we actually mount them on the vehicle so that you can turn them either through a hole in the roof or maybe through the window on the passenger side or something like that. And the reason we do that is oftentimes at the start of our hunts, the signals are fairly weak, and you wouldn't even be able to hear them if you didn't have a beam antenna. And as you drive along, you turn that. Clearly, if you don't have a way to mount it, yes, you can do the technique you mentioned where you stop the car, get out, take a bearing, get back in the car and drive. That's an option, but it's a little hard to do in Southern California traffic, so most people actually mount the antennas. Now, there are other ways to get bearings, such as the Doppler systems, which you can buy. They work well when the signal is really strong. When the signal is vertically polarized, they can work well. But you may or may not have any control over what the hider is using. If he's horizontally polarized or if he's very, very weak, you really need that beam antenna.
Okay, so there's some options, and the trick I always do is when I get really, really close is just get rid of the antenna altogether.
You can do that, certainly. And you're right. I didn't mention that you also need an antenna for mobile hunting if you're using a beam antenna. That can be a resistive antenna. Generally speaking, you have to be really, really close before the signal starts going directly into the receiver, so that's not usually a problem. So you will also want a resistive antenna. Or, as you say, there's other ways to knock down the signal, whether you're mobile or on foot, which might even include taking off the antenna, tuning 5 or 10 kc off the frequency of the hidden transmitter. Some people put the paper clip into the antenna just to give them a tiny little antenna to listen with. Those are all techniques that people use.
All right. Well, hopefully we've got everybody kind of with an appetite now, and we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and start taking questions on Twitter and at 812-650-9556 and get into this a little bit more with Joe Moell, K0OV, when we come back after this word from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live.
I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having an antenna party and I ran out of PL259s.
Oh, come in.
Thank you.
Would silver-plated PL259s from Tower Electronics be too good for your guests?
Those will be fine. Thank you. You saved my life the other night.
Oh, the PL259s from Tower Electronics?
Yes, they were very successful at the antenna party. My antenna works like a charm.
Then how can you ever thank me?
I'll try to think of something.
Don't be caught without PL259s. Visit Tower Electronics at a ham fest near you, or visit them online anytime at pl-259.com, or call 920-435-2973. They have adapters, cables, antennas, soldering supplies, and meters too.
If a man says something in the woods and there are no women there, is he still wrong? You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Thanks to Tower Electronics for sponsoring the show again. The Hamfest scheduled June 16th. They're in Monroe, Michigan for the Father's Day Fest there. And July 6th in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Or you can visit them anytime at pl-259.com. And it's a great place to get all your connectors and adapters for all your radios for direction finding. So ties right in with what we're talking about tonight. Ham Talk Live's on the air every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at hamtalklive.com. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And it's time now for your calls. So if you have a question for Joe, give us a call at 812-650-9556. Again, it's 812-650-9556. Or you can tweet us. It's at Ham Talk Live on Twitter. And if you're on Spreaker, you can type in the comments there too. But if you're listening to us on the podcast edition or on WTWW, we're not live on there, so you won't be able to reach us tonight. But give us a call at 812-650-9556 and ask your questions for Joe Moell, K0OV. And Joe, we didn't talk about some of the rules that you might want to say, okay, well, you're only within, 5 miles or 10 miles and for some of these competitions, you've got all kinds of rules that are out there. Why don't we talk a little bit about setting up some rules for your hunt?
Okay. Well, and that's one of the things I like when I write up the CQ Worldwide Fox Hunting Weekend results, and that is that in the mobile hunts, there's no two alike. Every place is different, and every group is different in terms of what they want. Out here in Southern California, there's a lot of hunters that would prefer just a signal to hunt, no rules of any kind, but that's a little unusual, particularly for beginners. So generally speaking, there needs to be a boundary. You need to know, and sometimes that's just like 15-mile radius of the start point or whatever, or something even more geographical in terms of roads or something like that. So you need a boundary. There should be some understanding as to whether or not the signal is going to be continuous or intermittent. There may be a rule in terms of the polarization of the antenna, or there may not. It's just really up to the group. There may be a rule in terms of how close it needs to be to a paved road. The typical rule we have in our Fullerton hunts is within 100 feet of access by standard passenger car, and that could mean that it's up on the international world. There's a very strict set of rules for international competitions. Of course, we have the USA Direction Finding Championships every year someplace. This year it's in North Carolina, and we follow a very strict set of rules that's set up by an international committee, because the people that win that those hunts are going to be going on to competitions around the world, and so what to expect in terms of the transmissions. I won't go into a lot of detail on those rules because they're very easy to find on the web at homingin.com and elsewhere, and you can kind of read up about what to expect. But that's what happens when you get into the strict world of on-foot hunting. But of course, if you're having a hunt in the park and you're hamfest, you can make the rules anything you want.
All right, very good. Well, what are some of the crazy things you've seen people do on these mobile hunts?
Well, I when I give a talk, one of the things I show is some pictures of the hunt. For example, that was on a Sunday afternoon, and everybody ended up in a park, and there was a young lady sunning in the park, and she was on a blanket, and then she was barely the only thing around, and the signal really seemed to be coming from her. And so I have a picture of the two of the hunters pointing their beams at her and saying, "Would you mind getting up off the blanket?" And and she did, and it wasn't under the blanket. In fact, the signal moved with her. As it turned out, the hider had used a very, very small transmitter that was sewn in to the top of her bikini.
Oh my goodness!
Now that's probably the most outrageous story that I tell.
That's very outrageous. That's almost unbelievable. Oh my goodness!
Some of the things you can't do anymore. I've heard of some of the crazy things that they did back in the 50s. For example, putting a transmitter under the seat in a departure lounge at Los Angeles Airport. Now you can't do that anymore.
No.
So we're somewhat limited, but these are the sort of crazy things that you will sometimes find.
Now, see, I was expecting a story like, well, they pointed a beam at a water tower and bounced it off of the water tower, or I wasn't quite expecting. That.
That's just too common nowadays in Southern California. I don't know what it's like, where you are, but in Southern California, almost everybody bounces a signal off a beam, because if you're down low, and you have to get a signal to the starting point, and there's a lot of hills between you, you try to bounce it off a mountain, and we have the mountains to do that here in Southern California, and that's what a lot of the hunters do. So that's just kind of standard operating procedure. And you'll experience it and you can bounce it off buildings too. If in the urban jungles, there are stories about people that have put transmitters in high-rise buildings, which again is a little bit difficult to do nowadays. But it really, in downtown Los Angeles, that makes it particularly difficult to find too.
Now, let's invite people again to write in here at Ham Talk Live on Twitter, or call 812-650-9556. We'll keep going, but if you have a question, please chime in. What about what do you do when you find the transmitter? Is there a way that you can actually prove that you found the transmitter? Now in a mobile hunt, it's obvious because there's an operator sitting there with everything. But if you do the automatic ones, what do you do to make sure that people actually found the transmitter?
Well, typically there is a sign-in sheet where the transmitter is, and you'll sign in. And if it's a mileage hunt, you'll put down your mileage. That's an interesting kind of fine point of the rules, because it is a transmitter hunt, and your job is to find the transmitter. But sometimes finding the transmitter is not what's going to happen, because on one of our hunts, again, the transmitter has to be within 100 feet of a standard passenger car, but sometimes the hider will use 500 feet of coax and put the antenna on the other side of a hill. And even though the transmitter is right next to the road, the signal is really not coming from the transmitter. It's coming from over the hill, which can really, shall we say, mess up the hunters. But so you'd obviously sometimes have to look with your eyes. There are times when hiders will put out decoy transmitters, or decoy something that looks like a transmitter. And we've had instances where people have signed in on a mobile hunt and they weren't signing in at the real transmitter, and so their score didn't count. So one of the things you'll want to do is use your sniffing gear, your close-in direction-finding gear, to make absolutely sure that what you found is the hidden transmitter. Again, this is on the mobile hunts, on the on-foot hunts, and in the international hunts. Usually, it's a lot easier to distinguish. You're going to find a little box that's the size of a chalkboard eraser, and to prove that you found it, there's a number of ways to do it. There are orienteering punches that are sometimes attached, and you punch a card that you carry to prove that you found it. There are one of the things I do oftentimes is put a sticker on the transmitter with a little 3-digit number, and you write down that number on your card, and when you bring it back, we check, and yes, you got the right number, so you prove that you found it. So there's various ways to do that.
812-650-9556 is the phone number. Let's talk a little bit about safety, because it is kind of easy to get carried away when you're doing this. You get competitive and you start to, have some dangerous moments. So let's talk a little bit about safety while you're doing a mobile hunt. Hopefully we don't have to talk about safety for on foot.
Well, you actually need to be
Watch
a little
out for
safe when you're on
holes.
foot. Yeah, well, yes, that's exactly right. And I was going to say, and that's one of the reasons we use the measuring tape antennas, is because they're a lot more eye safe in terms of if you fall on your antenna. It's a lot better to fall on a measuring piece of measuring tape than it is on a aluminum rod, for example. But in the mobile hunts, certainly there's a number of things to think about. First of all, make sure your gear is mounted securely. Your antenna, particularly if you're driving around with an antenna sticking out, so that no matter what happens, it's not going to injure someone by either breaking off or falling down or doing something like that. Have your equipment slide off, and and I've even seen instances where people were using batteries, and the batteries would short out because the wires would short out or something like that. And that's not something you want to do when you're driving down the road, is have a fire in your car. Certainly you want to, I recommend that it's 2-person or even more teams are usually better on a mobile hunt. One person can pay attention to driving. The other person tends to, can pay attention to the DF gear. That's certainly a lot safer way to do it. We have a name for the person that is the DF operator. We call him the navigesser, because they're usually navigating and guessing as they go along. So certainly that is just and take your time, even though if it's a time hunt, you want to get there really, really badly, but take the time to be safe. Certainly there's other things to think about, but think safety first at all times.
812-650-9556 is the phone number. We're going to finish up here in just a few minutes. So this is kind of the last call here for questions. If you have one for Joe Moell, K0OV from homingin.com, call us at 812-650-9556 or type to us on Twitter at Ham Talk Live, or if you're listening on Spreaker and you have an account, you can type in there on the comment section. Let's talk a little bit too about the differences. Now, I grew up always doing 2 meters, and everything I've done is 2 meters. I've never done the 80-meter hunt, and next year I'm working on a project that's going to have an 80-meter hunt. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between doing a hunt on 80 meters versus 2 meters.
Well, as I told you, a lot of the mobile hunting started on the 80-meter band or the 75-meter phone band, and that's also internationally where the first big area ARDF radio orienteering events were held, was on the 80-meter band. The nice thing about the 80-meter band is one of the things that makes transmitter hunting on 2 meters difficult is those reflections we talked about from the hills and the buildings, things like that. They don't exist on 80 meters, generally speaking. If you get a bearing on 80 meters, and it's a good bearing, and it'll be a sharp bearing because the DF gear, usually you're hunting you're using a deep null in the pattern of the antenna to find the direction that you want to go. So if you have a good bearing and you mark it on the map and follow it, chances are pretty good you're going to be fairly close, and that goes for whether it's mobile or on foot. That's the advantage. The gear is actually, for on-foot hunts, the gear is really pretty simple. You can make just a receiver with a ferrite rod or an air core loop antenna. So a ferrite rod is kind of like you have in an old-fashioned AM transistor radio, which you probably have noticed is directional. If you turn that transistor radio, you can get dulls and peaks in the response, and that's exactly what you're using here. So the ferrite rod antenna can be big or small, but I've seen them as small as like 2 or 3 inches, for example, and so that can make for a very compact set. And when you're working with scouts, sometimes the really young scouts, it's a lot easier for them to hold an 80-meter DF set than it is to hold that measuring tape beam, actually. So there's something to be said for 80 meters, and the response is a little different. You hunt a little differently. As I said, the rod antenna, and you can get the same results with maybe a 4-inch loop on 80 meters. Those antennas have a very sharp null in the pattern. There's actually 2 nulls, front and back. And you use those nulls rather than the peak of the signal to get your bearing because they are so very short. Now, one of the problems with a ferrite rod or a loop antenna is those nulls are bidirectional. So if you say, well, it appears to be from the north, well, it could equally be from the south. So 80-meter sets have what's called a sense antenna built in. And the sense antenna is like a whip antenna or just a piece of wire, and the signal from that antenna is combined with the signal from the loop at the proper phase, and it gives you a way to check which of the 2 peaks of the loop is the right one to follow. It gives you sort of a cardioid pattern, but the most important thing of it is it makes one of the peaks louder than the other, stronger than the other, so it tells you which of the ones to follow. So that's kind of how an 80-meter set works in principle. It can be a fairly simple set. It can be a direct conversion receiver or really a simple superhead. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Oh, by the way, most 80-meter hunts take place during the day, because at night the skip comes in and it makes it a lot harder to do DF on 80 meters at night.
And then we could have a real challenging hunt when you get everything coming in. Well, let's finish up here, and why don't you take a minute or two to talk about your website, because you've had homingin.com for quite a while. In fact, I think you've had homingin.com as long as since Al Gore invented the internet. So let's talk a little bit about all your massive resources there and what people can find there.
Well, that's the thing. When you've had a website a long time, you add things to it and just keep adding and adding, and it gets bigger and bigger. I started it kind of as a supplement to the column back when it was in 73 magazine, in terms of having additional resources and a place for people to find out information. And as I said, it's grown from there. But you will find there's information on beginner 2-meter hunts, 80-meter hunts. There's information on mobile hunts, and a lot of information on ARDF, or the radio orienteering style of hunt. And that's because we've had now a national competition every year since 2001, and there's the stories of and photos of each of those is on the website. And if, as a point of privilege, I'd like to mention that we will have the USA Championships in North Carolina. They're being put on by the Backwoods Orienteering Club is the sponsoring club this year. They're going to be in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, and they will start at the end of July, the actual with some training sessions. And if you want to learn out in the woods how to do this, these training sessions are outstanding. And then around the 1st of August, the actual competitions will start. We haven't had a time to talk about all the various kinds of competitions, such as sprint and fox oaring, as well as the classic competitions, but you can read about them on the website, and you can experience them for yourself at the championships. The nice thing about the championships is ours are open to anyone, any skill level, any age, really, as long as you're not likely to get lost out in the woods. We really don't want to send out a search party if we don't have to. But other than that, you're welcome to come out and try it and learn. And there's everybody that's there is quite eager and willing to help you get better. So we certainly encourage people to learn more about that. And that information is also at homingin.com.
Okay, so homingin.com. That's HOMINGIN.com, and you can find all that information. Well, Joe, you're a wealth of information, and I'm so thankful that we got you on the show here tonight to talk about this, and we'll get into this some more. I suspect this was a request from the N1KSC folks, more or less, and I just happened to think, well, wow, I haven't done a show about this yet, and it's been 3 years now, so we needed to do that. But we may dive into this some more in the future, and would welcome you coming back to do that.
That would be great. There's still a lot more to say about it, and I certainly hope people will realize that this is a fun aspect of ham radio. It has some importance in terms of enforcement. It has terms of search and rescue and other important things that are done with DF, but mostly it's just a lot of fun. So I hope people will give it a try.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And that is a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. Thanks to my guest, Joe Moell, K0OV, and everyone out there in cyberspace for listening in, and invite you back next Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. For a list of all of our upcoming guests, just go to hamtalklive.com. And if you like Ham Talk Live, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen. That helps others find us faster. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.